Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. We're going to be starting in a few seconds. So while we wait for people to arrive, could you, in the question and answer box, in the chat box, tell us who you are and where you are from? Thank you. Okay, hello the Yemen, hello Egypt. Okay, we'll be starting in a few minutes. While we're waiting for people to join, if you could use the question and answer box, the chat box, to tell us who you are and where you are from. Okay, hello Bahrain, hello Egypt again, hello there. Hello colleagues from the Yemen, hello Lebanon. Very happy that you're with us today. We'll be starting in a few minutes. While we're waiting for people to finish that last slurp of coffee, if you could tell us who you are and where you are from. Hello, Fatima from the Lebanon. Okay. Hello, colleagues from Egypt, Salma. Hello, Nancy from the Lebanon. Hello, Michael. Good solid Egyptian name there from Egypt. Okay, more colleagues from Egypt. Okay, we'll be starting in a couple of minutes, so if you can tell us in the chat box who you are and where you are from. Hello, Nasser from Palestine. Good you're with us. We'll be starting in 1 minute. While we're waiting, if you could tell us in the chat box, if you're just joining us, who you are and where you are from. Jinan from Lebanon, hello there. Okay, I think we're ready to start. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. My name is John Shackleton. I work for the British Council. I look after our teacher development work for the Middle East and North Africa region, and I'm based in Cairo. I'm joined by my colleagues Noura Al-Sabah from Bahrain, colleague Tema Shura with me here in Cairo, and of course Hala Ahmed, the face of Ask Hala, face and voice of Ask Hala, who's also joining us from Egypt and is waving to us all now. If you haven't joined one of these sessions before, part of the Ask Hala webinar series, I'll just let you know that these are regular webinars that we host, and we host them now the last Thursday of every month, so please put a note in your calendar. Take place at 4 p.m. Egypt time. This is the beginning of a new series. We've completed 8 that look specifically at supporting teachers in the development of online teaching skills. And we've got a fantastic program series lined up for you of another 8 sessions that will help us not just to develop our online teaching skills, but also to look at blended learning skills as well. That's the main focus of the content for this next phase, the next part of our journey in the Ask Hala webinar series. Okay, as you will know, if you attend regularly or if you use Teams live events, there's a question and answer box. So we very much welcome your comments throughout the webinar. We'll be pausing from time to time to look at those comments and questions, so do please keep them coming in. So that was the introduction. So now to the beat of today. The topic that Hala is going to be talking about is techniques to help learners catch up. Before handing over to Hala, why did we choose this topic? Well, we asked regular attendees of our Ask Hala webinar series what topics would they like to cover, and this is one of the topics that was suggested. That's the first reason. The second reason, of course, is that it's particularly relevant as a topic to our current situation, as in some places schools are reopening, schools are thinking very seriously and very carefully about the impact of school closures and how best to organise programs that will help learners to catch up. It's important because, as we know as practitioners, of course, that the break, even if it's after the long summer or the long holiday, it takes time, doesn't it, for learners to get back to the place that they were at before the break. So in a general sense, a break in learning is a challenge in terms of catching up, and we've had a very long break and a very difficult break, and as learners return, then that catch up on lost learning, particularly important, particularly relevant now. That's the first point. And the second point is, and it's a related point, of course, that the evidence suggests, and I think we know this from our own personal experience, that individuals who were struggling before the break, for whatever reason, the extended break that we've lived through, that we're living through, that's been particularly difficult for them. So the gap between learners who were doing well and learners who were struggling for whatever reason, that gap, because of the impact of COVID-19, because of the impact of school closures, that gap has now grown. So Hala is going to be talking about that gap and be talking through some practical examples of how it is that we as teachers can help bridge that gap, can help catch up on lost learning, and help our learners get back to the place that they were before, to build on that and to reach their educational potential. So I'd like now to hand over to Hala. Very warm welcome, Hala. How are you doing?
Hi, John. I'm doing okay, thank you. I hope you're well. And thanks for everybody who joined us today. And thanks for my colleagues Timur and Noura for supporting the whole thing. Thanks very much, John, for the introduction. That was really useful, and it actually leads us smoothly towards the the beginning of the webinar today. So just to give you a bit of an idea about the learning outcomes of our webinar today, we're going together to look at the negative impacts of the school closure and the learning loss. We're going also to look at how this difficult situation, the COVID situation, can actually help us reimagine education. So there is always an opportunity within a challenge. We are going to offer you some advice, principles, and also some toolkits to help you build the blended learning solutions now, but also prepare for a post-COVID educational world. So we've got two perspectives to look through today. We're going to look at the existing situation, the current situation now, today, and also we're going to think about tomorrow. And we'll finish the webinar today with some practical examples for the teachers and the classroom practitioners so that they help learners catch up on their lost learning. And please, John and Noura, feel free to stop me if we started to receive questions in the Q&A box. So first of all, let's identify the problem. What the problem is exactly and how big the problem is. And in this occasion, actually, I'd like to take you through some data from the UNESCO McKinsey report produced in July 2020. And you probably know this already. Throughout the past year, 1.6 billion children affected by school closures around the world. And to provide remedial solutions for this and to mitigate the learning loss, this is definitely a challenge. We're talking about 1.6 billion children. But what is the impact of the school closure actually? It means if the schools are closed, it means that only 70% of the learning gains will be achieved in reading, meaning that students will only be able to achieve 75% of their learning gains in reading and 50% only of the learning gains in mathematics. And this actually means, this is the equivalent of a full year behind in some grades compared to a normal year. So in other words, or in simple words, that children have lost 1 year of their learning gains. They're technically 1 year behind because of the school closures. Also, the COVID-19 situation will exacerbate the existing learning gaps between schools and students. On the students level, the students who already face challenges will fall further behind, will have more challenges, especially now we're talking about families facing additional challenges. We're adding to the challenging list, challenges around remote learning, internet connection, school disruption, and all of them. And on the schools level, the teachers will suffer, actually will have challenges handling very large classes. They will find it difficult to follow up with the students, and the schools with weak IT system or IT infrastructure will lose time setting up platforms and so on. So in fact, if we have existing learning gaps already in some countries, the COVID-19 will increase these gaps and will actually create new gaps between students and between schools. But it's not just like that. It's not only on the students and school level. It's not just an educational problem. Actually, the report goes further and gives information around significant economic consequences. So the setback caused by the school closures will cause some countries some economical struggles. So according to the World Bank as well, that's another important report, the 5 months shutdown in a school generates what is worth 10 trillion US dollars. So that's an economic loss, a big one. And this means for educational investment, the loss of 16% of the investments that governments have made in this particular generation of students. So based on all of that, that's the problem. There is loss in the learning gains. Students are academically falling behind with the equivalence of 1 academic year, and there is major significant economic consequences, and there is a loss of 16% of educational investments on the governmental level. So based on that, we must have some immediate and serious remedial actions. Because if you look at all of that on the grand scheme of things, from like a holistic point of view, countries now want to be able to meet the SDG 4 goal. SDG 4 goal is the Sustainable Developmental Goal number 4 according to the UNESCO, and it's about education. So the plan is to achieve this goal by 2030, but it seems impossible now given all of these barriers and the problems. But is it all bad news? Is the situation really bad? No. So there is always an opportunity from within a challenge, and as they say, in each cloud there is a silver lining. So if we agree now that the world, the systems, the schools, education systems should and must respond quickly to this. 1, to mitigate the impacts that we've talked about. 2, which is really progressive and even more important, is to take this as an opportunity to make education more inclusive, effective, and resilient before than it was before COVID-19. So actually, it's not only a problem that we're responding to, it's also an opportunity to improve the education system and make it more inclusive, effective, and resilient, more than it used to be before COVID-19. So there is an opportunity here. It's not only about challenge. And the things that we've been talking about for a while, the things that we've been dreaming of for a while, reimagining education and reforming education, can actually happen now because of COVID-19. It's forced and reinforced because of the new situation. So based on this current situation, education now can take place in and outside the school, and that has been always a vision or a dream that so many educational systems have been advocating for. Yes, and it reminds us with one of the sessions that we've talked about blended learning. So if we now want to reimagine education as something that can take place inside and outside schools, that takes us to the concept of how to implement blended learning. Now, as you can see, there is an old picture on the screen, and I want you to think a little bit about the message that I'm trying to convey here. So that's obviously a school, but what's missing in this school? Can you guess? Maybe Noura or John can tell me about your guessings. So that's a class, that's a school, but there is something missing.
You mean apart from the roof?
Oh, you're very close. The roof and
the building.
The walls, yes, exactly. Yeah. So exactly, that's the concept that has been like a dream for many educationalists, if you like. So we'd like to change the school from a fixed place where children must go at a fixed time, and we'd like to extend that place to go to the child. So it's not only the child comes to the school, but the school can also go to the child anywhere, anytime. And that's the concept of having a school without walls. So although the picture has got literally a school without walls, but this is the concept that after the COVID-19 situation, so many educationalists and practitioners are aspiring to. And the main essence of this concept is that learning happens outside the school, alongside inside the school. That could be outside at home or somewhere else, or remotely or somewhere else. And this combination of inside outside school learning should actually set the norm, should be the norm rather than the exception. So it's the exception now because of COVID-19, but we'd like to have it as the norm, because that's could be a better way and more effective way of learning, rather than the exception created by a problem. It's also seen as a launching pad, if you like, that would take the education system that we're all part of from today's world to tomorrow's world. And we rely on the significant investment in educational technology. So over the past year, countries, ministries, schools, and even communities of teachers have invested a lot in educational technology and the remote learning strategies, and this investment can be used as the launching pad or the springboard for tomorrow's world, for the new post-COVID-19 world. So it seems like we need to take advantage of the lessons that we're learning today, so that we can reimagine the education tomorrow. The World Bank actually has got two useful toolkits in this regard. Two useful toolkits. They call them knowledge packs, and they are really useful for teachers and the classroom practitioners, English language practitioners and experts, if you like. They give practical advice and practical tools on how to imagine or reimagine education. You know, how to handle education in this transitional period, but also to reimagine education for tomorrow. The first tool is a knowledge pack around remote learning in low resource countries, and it focuses actually on the least developed countries. It gives you a principle for educational technology, and it gives you top tips. And I'm going to leave the link to you as part of this presentation at the end. And this is a screenshot from this toolkit actually for you, just to clarify my point around how useful this toolkit could be. So it gives you a list of advice, for example, on how to manage remote learning. And one of the advice is one piece of advice is to develop both short-term and medium-term and medium-long-term plan. You focus on emergency, but also you focus on preparing yourself and your school for the future. Another piece of advice is to use the most widely used existing technology in the country. So, of course, media makes it very easy for us to know about learning technologies around the world, and you can be easily fascinated and impressed by all of those fantastic technological tools here and there, but actually when you wanted to deploy learning technologies in your country, think about the most widely used existing technology, because this makes it more accessible, this makes it more relevant to the users in your country. Also consider using a combination of multiple technologies, and we call it multi-channeling technologies, multi-channeling teaching. And for online learning, focus on curating existing content rather than developing content. And it's actually a piece of advice that we keep telling our teachers to follow. Do not reinvent the wheel. Do not kill yourself to develop new content if the content is already there. Just to do some curation, collect, filter, put in an order that suits you, suits the learning outcome, suits your learners' needs, and use that. Last but not least, don't forget to include and involve parents and caregivers, because these are critical players in the field. Another toolkit from the World Bank.
Sorry, if I just before you move on to the next advice and toolkit, I just wanted to, a really interesting comment that's come in from Nadim. I'm sorry to interrupt you in full flow, but I think it's quite interesting, and I think it's, you know, it will bring us back, but also inform what you're talking about now. He's drawn a very interesting parallel between the concept of a school without walls to the idea of a classroom that is beyond the textbook, and I think that's quite nice, isn't it? Isn't that a nice way of looking at things? That
yeah, exactly, John. I wanted to say the same thing. Yeah, I like this comment. Thank you, Nadim.
That's right.
Thanks, Nadim. Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's you know, it's making the leap, isn't it? Because at one point we couldn't really have imagined teaching without a textbook, but of course we do that all the time, and that we dip into the textbook and use other kinds of resources in the face-to-face classroom. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? We probably couldn't have imagined learning without that physical space, but we've done it.
Exactly.
A long time now.
Exactly. So the dreams are coming true now because of a pandemic. So we've been talking, I mean, if you, like 2 years ago, one of the dreams of the materials writers and the curriculum developers is to have a classroom beyond the textbook. And you know, you can listen to teacher trainers talking about, please leave the course book a little bit and create world to the learners beyond the course book, and use supplementary materials, and you know, enrich the learner's experience. So all of these have been like dreams or something that was difficult to achieve, but now we're doing it. We're doing it because we're forced to do it because of the pandemic, but we're doing it. It's possible. It can happen. So thanks, Nadim, for your comment. It's very relevant really to what we're saying today.
And Hala, I think the positive side of COVID-19 is that digital learning has been accelerated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, Noura, one of the professional practices is to integrate ICT. So teachers who are listening to us today know what I'm talking about. One of the 12 professional practices in the teacher CPD framework by the British Council is about integrating the technology, ICT. And we've been telling the teachers to do this, and we've been training the teachers to do this, and most of the responses have been like, no, it's difficult to implement, it's overwhelming, I don't know how to do it, I'm not trained, and now they're able to do it with the minimum of training, with very little support, and in the middle of a pandemic, and it's possible. Anyway, the next toolkit offered by the World Bank actually is a very interesting one, and again, it's a knowledge pack. It's like a manual for classroom practitioners on how to use mobile, distance and hybrid education solutions, and it gives you use cases. It gives you statistics, evidence on effectiveness, and case studies, and also how to. Again, that's another screenshot from inside the toolkit so that you get an idea of how useful this pack for you. And in this section, it tells you about 9 use cases of mobile phones in distance learning. It says you can use it for communication and coordination. It can be used for content delivery, whether it's static, one way, using audio, images, voice notes, podcasts, okay? Or whether it's interactive, two-way content, which it changes in response to student, and that could be chat box, for example, as simple as that. The chat box is 2 ways. Or mobile games, or ebooks, adaptive assessment, and so on. It tells you also that you can use the mobile phones for synchronous instruction conducted by the parent at home, one-on-one or one-on-many. It could be used for synchronous instruction conducted by the teacher. It could be used for peer-to-peer collaboration between students as well as between teachers. And it could be used for assessment. It could be used for monitoring and evaluation and the data collection and, collecting evidence and for research purposes. So it's quite useful, really. And it goes on to give you case studies from different countries in the world. Now, I'm taking you really to something that I personally found quite useful, which is the decision tree. So if I want now to respond to the learning loss that happened to my learners across the last year, how do I make the decision? Where do I start? What do I want? So I need something to organize my thinking and support me with taking the right decision. And I came across a decision tree that is produced by the INI, and the INI is the Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies. But I actually adapted the decision tree. I simplified it, make it simple for you to understand and use. And I also created 3 different scenarios for 3 different teachers. Let's have a look at the first scenario. So now the schools have been closed for a while, or closed and open and closed again. Some learning loss definitely has happened. We've got a problem. I want to be back to the school next week and I don't know what to do. So what do I want to do? That's question number 1. Scenario 1, a teacher is saying time is really tight and I want to prepare my students as much as I can, but I can't cover the whole curriculum in its current state, of course. So a curriculum which was designed initially to be covered in 6 months is supposed to be covered now in 3 or 2 months. It's simply too much for the time frame. So obviously this teacher tends to think about doing less because they can't cover the entire curriculum. Teacher 2, I'm very keen on teaching my students the whole curriculum, okay, because it's really important. So no sacrifices here. And I'm worried if I skip something from the curriculum, this might affect their academic performance in the exam. So if I skip this chapter or this unit, this might come in the exam. So everybody is devastated. Time is limited, I know, but students need to be up to the challenge. There is no other way. It's a challenge that we all need to take. So this teacher apparently wants to do the same amount of content, but faster. This teacher wants to beat the time. Teacher 3, now I have noticed that my students still struggle with some parts in the curriculum. Some parts that I already taught before the summer break, for example. I'm worried if I just ignore that and continue to teach new parts from the curriculum, this just would add to the problem and they would struggle with both the old and the new content. So they wouldn't understand either the old or the new content. So the teacher here apparently wants to recap on something they taught before, and they want to do it again before taking the decision to do something new. Now, which teacher of the three can you relate more? Teacher 1, teacher 2, teacher 3. Please post your reaction in the Q&A box. Perhaps John or Noura can tell me about what you think.
Yeah, there is already Hala. Thank you. One
Great.
participant already mentioned that she's number 1.
She's number 1. Okay, she wants to do this. All right. So who are you guys? Are you teacher 1, 2, or 3?
Teacher 1, teacher 3. So we have different.
We have different feelings.
Yeah.
We have a mixed bag here. Okay. Of course, I know you can relate to the 3 scenarios. It's something that happen every day. Before we proceed to the responses and the practical solutions for the 3 scenarios, I just want you to think about these key terms or key definitions, because we're going to deal with them in the next part of the webinar. Accelerated learning, condensed curriculum, remedial instruction, learning outcome, or competency. So what do you know? Are you familiar with these terms and definitions? How far and how much you know about them? So are you familiar with any of them or all of them? And do you know anything about any of them? How much do you know? Do we have any responses? Noura, John?
Teachers are still
thinking. Okay.
Putting questions about the previous question about types of teachers.
Ah, I see. Okay. Yeah, it's relevant, isn't it? So there is still there.
Well, while we're waiting for questions and comments to come in, there was an earlier comment which would be, I think, a very good one and very relevant. That you know, how can you speed things up? How can you condense learning? How can you give remedial teaching when learners are struggling with the technical problems of being online, the technical issues to do with digital learning? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, actually, I think the answer is within the question itself. So, 1, students are struggling because of the school disruption. 2, students are struggling because of the digital challenge. 3, we need to condense the curriculum. So I think in the first two challenges, the school closure and the digital struggle, actually makes the third, condensing the curriculum, makes it really urgent, makes it really legitimate, if you like. So if your students already struggling with the digital world and the school has been disrupted, I think condensing the curriculum would help solve the first 2 problems, and we'll look more into that now. All right, so just wanted to have a chat with you before we deep dive into these terms and definitions. The accelerated learning and the condensed curriculum, the remedial instruction, and the learning outcome and competency. So let's see how far you're familiar with those as we continue with our webinar.
Hala, some of the participants are familiar, and to some of them these definitions are new, and to others only accelerated learning is new.
Right, interesting. All right, so we've got different levels of familiarity here. So let me introduce you to my decision tree. That's the tree that I simplified so that it helps me make a decision, or at least organize my thinking when I want to support my learners with catching up. So the question I asked myself yesterday is, what do I want to do? So next week is my first week back to school after a long closure and after a summer break. And in normal situations, you know this better than me, students come back from the summer holiday, you know, remembering very little from the past academic year. So if I want to do less, if the answer is yes, and to do less is teacher number one, you know, the curriculum is too big for the given time frame, so I want to do less because I can't cover the whole curriculum. So if the answer is yes, the answer is, or the response you need to adopt is condensing, or your response is going to be a condensed response. And that means condensing the curriculum for students to learn content missed because of disruption. So because of the disruption, I'm going to condense the content that they missed so that they can learn and rejoin the system after disruption, after the school break, after the school closure. If the answer is no, you need to consider the other two options. And the other two options is doing the same curriculum but faster, or doing something again, master it, get it straight before doing something new. And if you want to do something, if you want to do the same but faster, if your answer to this question is yes, and that's teacher number two, so your response here will be accelerated, meaning you will give access to the same content, but in an accelerated time frame. Okay, and here comes a caveated challenge. There is hidden challenge for the students, but they have to be up to that. But if your answer to this is no, I don't want to do the same, so you need to consider the other two options, which is doing less or doing again. If you want to do something again and get it straight before you do something new, and your answer to this question is yes, so your response is remedial. And that means you provide additional support to something, to a problem, to tackle a problem, with the concurrent regular classes. So you teach what you have to teach, but you also recap on something old, something you taught before, so that they master it. You make sure it's mastered, they get it, they know it very well, then you teach something new. And if the answer is no, you need to consider the other two options, and so on. So that's a simplified decision tree, so that you can make up your mind. Wanna do less, wanna do the same but faster, wanna do something again, an old thing again before doing something new. And you've got three different types of responses: condensed, accelerated, remedial, and we'll give practical examples on each of them in a moment.
On the Hala, on the subject of those three different models, there's been lots of interesting comments coming in, and I picked out one which I think is good, again from Nadim. He says, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. We don't have to accelerate.
Okay.
Try to feed the first bird well, then you can look for other birds. And I've understood from that what he's saying is that it's important to establish good practices, establish something concrete in terms of knowledge or skill. And I think that's what you mean by get it straight, isn't it?
Exactly. I think Nadim, from what he's saying, tends to follow the remedial approach. Like, you know, establish good practices, make sure everybody in the class gets it, they master it, they can handle it before you start looking at something new. And Nadim, you're very wise indeed. So we might have Ask Nadim series in the future.
And there are more comments, Hala, about this. From one comment from Asma. To her, the curriculum should be condensed in order to accelerate learning. So she is mingling two things together, or mixing condensed and accelerated together.
Yeah, that's a good point, Asma, actually. The eclectic approach. The eclectic approach is when you have a mix of all of the three. So you condense the curriculum, but also you give additional support to parts of the curriculum you taught before, and you deliver the whole thing, you teach the whole thing, the condensed thing, the final version of your modified curriculum, you teach that in an accelerated manner. So you can possibly follow what we can call an eclectic approach, or a combination of the three responses. It's your decision. The tree is just to organize and clear your ideas, clear your thinking. That's a good point as well.
Exactly, Hala. This is what Nancy is suggesting, mixing the three together.
Nice. Yes. Thanks, Nancy and Asma. This is a really valid point you're saying. Let's focus now on the first type of response, the condensed curriculum. The condensed curriculum supports the learner's acquisition of key knowledge and skills. And the word key here is key, actually. So we do not ask the learners in a condensed curriculum to absorb and acquire all knowledge and skills. No, we're very selective here. We want them to acquire key knowledge and skills in a compressed time frame, of course. Okay, so it's compressed, it's condensed. And a condensed curriculum identifies and scans and maps out the most important knowledge and skills. Again, it's a very selective approach. It doesn't teach the students everything in the curriculum. It scans for the most important knowledge and skills. What makes this piece of knowledge or that skill most important? It's the one that the learners need to achieve grade level proficiency. So I'm teaching grade 4, for example, and the students in grade 4 in this grade should be able to talk about their daily routines using the present simple tense, for example. So if I have 7 learning outcomes, if I have 7 skills, if I have a range of knowledge, I actually should be looking for the most important knowledge and skills that help the students use the past simple tense to talk about their daily routines in this given grade. So where do I get a condensed curriculum? The answer is simple. I get a condensed curriculum from a standard curriculum, from an existing curriculum. So I take the standard existing curriculum I have, and I purposefully modify it. Again, the word purposefully here is key. We modify for purpose. We look for purposeful knowledge and educational items. And we focus on essential knowledge and skills. So how does that help learners catch up on missed content, but also progress to the next grade level content, or at least complete and achieve what is required them for a grade level, a particular grade level? So first of all, we need to know that a condensed curriculum does not teach all subject areas faster. That's not the accelerated one. That's not about faster. That's about priorities. That's about priority outcomes. So what I want to do is to look at the teaching and learning activities and spot the priority outcomes. And what are the priority outcomes? These are the learning outcomes that describe essential skills and the knowledge that first are transferable across multiple subject areas. So what makes a learning outcome a priority outcome is that once the students get it, once they master it, they acquire some skills that are transferable across areas, not only for today's lesson, so they wouldn't acquire only skills around using present simple to talk about daily routines, but they can use this in reading, writing, mathematics, maybe arts and drama, critical thinking, problem solving. So it's one skill, but it's transferable across the subject areas. That's a priority outcome. Two, another thing that makes an outcome a priority is that it gives the learners the tools they need for future and self-directed learning. What I want them to be independent learners. I want them to use the present simple to talk about daily routines, but not only for today's lesson, not only for this term. It's for future, and it's for their self-directed learning. Okay, so think about future, next year, life outside the class. Is this a skill you're teaching them going to help them become autonomous, independent, going to help them with their future plans as human beings? If the answer is yes, that's a priority outcome. Priority LOs or priority learning outcomes, how to select them, how to find them, how to identify them. You've got two ways, simply. One, you look at the existing standard curriculum, you review it, bingo, it has a priority outcome because it fulfills the two conditions. It's transferable and it's sustainable. It's for future learning. And it guarantees the application of the essential skills and knowledge. It's applicable. It has got application. Okay, so I'm going to take this as a priority outcome. It's already there. I just wanted to find it in the curriculum. Or I opened the standard curriculum. I couldn't find a priority outcome. So I need to synthesize the learning outcomes I can find, and I need to come up with one new outcome, but it still fulfills the two conditions and it still describes the application of skills and knowledge, and I use it as my priority outcome. Two ways. So while planning for your condensed curriculum, there are some tips. Set criteria to establish priority outcomes. This is a thing we've just talked about. Transferability, sustainability, applicability. Criteria, I know what I'm looking for. Two, determine on a sequence, on a learning sequence. So what I'm going to teach now and how this relates to the previous things I taught and how this relates to the next learning units I'm going to teach. And here comes the importance role of revision. When you revise the prerequisite of knowledge and skills from previous learning units, then you relate this to the existing or the current knowledge you need to teach. That's a good planning tip. I need also to think about a pacing guide. So here you can see that I want to do two things, to revise and to teach. But how many lessons I'm going to allocate for revising and how many I'm going to allocate for teaching? So you need to adjust your pacing. Again, they've been away because of the school disruption. And while they're away, they've seen, maybe they've encountered some family deaths or family sickness, or dad has lost his job, or the country has gone through a conflict. So think about the difficult experiences they might have experienced during the disruption. And when they come back to you, the thing you can offer them is not just academic content. You can also offer them some social, emotional support, also through learning and through education. So make sure around your academic activities, you build a number of social, emotional learning activities.
One of the questions that came in, Hala, which was about learner-centeredness versus teacher-centeredness. When you're talking about planning tips, do you think that you should involve your learners in deciding what your priorities are?
Yeah, of course you can. You can if you can do it. If you can survey them very quickly, do it. If you're in touch with them through WhatsApp or something, you can ask them simply, out of these 10 topics from last year, what are the most difficult topics for you? Which of them you're still struggling with? Which of them you're confident with? So you can survey them in a very simple way, and in this way you involve them in making decisions. So you know now you're not planning in vacuum, or you're not sitting in your ivory tower or something. When you say I'm going to give them additional support on this topic or that topic, you know why. You know because number X of students are struggling with it, and you have evidence, you got messages, you got feedback. Yeah.
And that relates to another comment and another question about different levels within the class. So I think what you've just said, I think deals with that to some extent, doesn't it? That you include learners who are doing well, who are struggling, and that you look at what kind of priorities they have, and as we would generally do, try to teach in a differentiated sort of way. Do you agree with that?
I agree. I think this is not new because of COVID. You differentiate your instruction anyways. Yeah, you make sure when you design and you plan for your activities, you have this range of activities. Differentiated lesson planning. You think about the high achievers as well as the slow achievers. You make sure a part of your lesson appeals to those, another part of your lesson appeals to those. So that's something we normally do as part of our daily job, right? And actually this links to number 5 on the screen. When you make your lesson plans inclusive, it includes everybody. It doesn't leave a student behind. Inclusive and engaging instructional practices or classroom practices. That's key. Now, I'll give you a practical example. That's Hala's example. Let's say I'm teaching for the first time after a long school closure next week, next Sunday. And I need to condense a part of the curriculum. Let's say the first 3 units, for example, I need to condense those. And I'll tell you what I did now. First, I selected my priority outcome, and my priority outcome was actually there in the curriculum, and I think it's a very important learning outcome because it's a transferable. Students can use it across multi areas, and also it's for their future development. And this priority outcome is using the present perfect to talk about life experiences, but in a multicultural discussion. Okay, so I spotted that one as a priority outcome. Now, what did I do? I broke down this priority outcome to two, let's say, learning outcome, very relevant to the class. One, using a present perfect in question form to ask people about their life experiences. Two, use present perfect to engage in an oral discussion, so perhaps some speaking activities here with people from different cultures. But I also linked that to previous learning outcomes from things I taught before, and this is what I call the prerequisite skills from grade 2. I'm teaching grade 3, but I had a look at the curriculum of grade 2, and the prerequisites here are using present perfect in positive and negative form. So in term 1 or last year, they had to study this. This year had to study that. Why it's good to have both? Because this will determine my learning sequence. So my learning sequence is like this. I'm going to revise present perfect in positive form. That's from last year. I'm going to teach present perfect in question form. That's from this year. And I'm going to revise present perfect in negative form. That's from last year, from grade 2. And I'm going to teach present perfect with high level expressions, and that's from grade 3 this year. Okay, so my learning sequence is between revising old content and teaching new content. That's why I looked at the prerequisites skills from past year. Then the other thing I developed in this simple plan is my pacing guide. And again, as I said 2 minutes before, how many lessons I'm going to allocate for each step. So for revision, for revising the present perfect in positive form, I'm going to allocate 1 lesson. Okay. For teaching present perfect in question form, I'm going to allocate 1 lesson. But for teaching present perfect, using present perfect with high level expressions in oral discussions with people from different cultures, I'm going to allocate 2 lessons. Okay, so that's my simple plan for, let's say, the first 3 units. I think the most important learning outcome in the first 3 units, back to school, is using present perfect to talk about life experiences in a multicultural setting. Okay, and that's my simple plan.
Hala, just before you move on, there's some interesting comments coming in about self-directed learning and learner autonomy and learners taking responsibility for their learning. And clearly, you know, that if giving learners the skills to learn themselves is desperately important to the issue of catch-up. From that, my question is, do you think that that's suitable for all ages? Do you think you can help young learners, for example, develop those self-directed learning skills, or do you think it's just for older people?
I never thought that a learning strategy is exclusive for an age group. I never thought that in my entire teaching career. The age group restrictions wouldn't stop me, But what I can do is to adapt my way. So if I have a set of strategies to promote learner autonomy, learner independence, I can play with those strategies. So have a look, for example, at the plan we have on the screen now. Using a present perfect to talk about life experiences in a multicultural discussion. If you're teaching, let's say, teens, you're going to use a specific content, specific activities where they have room to talk about, for example, what they have done last year, what have they done during the closure, or what they have learned during the closure, and if they have ever tried an unusual indoor sport or something. But if you're doing the same thing with primary, for example, you don't have to get them to talk about something complicated. You just can ask them a simple question. Have you, for example, have you helped your mom in the kitchen? How many times have you helped her? What did you do exactly? So it's, you know, you change the content, you change the topic, you change the level of difficulty, but you don't change the principle. The principle is to make them autonomous, to make them think about their personal life experiences. The response is different. Somebody will use simple sentences. Somebody will respond with a paragraph. Somebody will respond with idioms and expressions. So differentiate the task, differentiate the instructions, but have the same learning objective, right? We can talk for hours about differentiation and differentiated instruction. It's like it's a big area. But I am never restricted by the age group. I just change my way. That's another practical example, but this time it's not from Hala, it's from Salma. And Salma is actually adopting the accelerated approach. And now she's thinking about what the return would look like. She's saying my students will return to school with only half coming each day. Meaning students will be 1 day on and 1 day off. Okay, so 1 day in class, 1 day off class. And my face-to-face time with them will be half what it normally is. Okay, so if time is shortened to half, now I need to accelerate. I need to beat the clock. But actually, Salma designed this tool for her to organize her thinking. She wants to put down ideas about the effect of this halving the time on the time with students. She's saying here, my face-to-face time with students will be broken and less than usual. The effect of this on the students' learning, my students will have to do more self-directed learning at home. I mean, if I used to support you 5 days a week, face-to-face instruction in the classroom, now I can only support you 1 day a week. So the other 4 days, there must be a way for you to keep you learning, to keep you connected, to keep you using English, right? So I need to think about self-directed learning strategies, self-access resources, some learner autonomy activities that you can do away from me, but at the same time achieving the learning objectives I would have achieved if I had the same face-to-face time. On my teaching, the effect will be like this. I will have to think of more homework, and homework is a simple word, but it's actually one of the catch-up techniques. The things that they cannot achieve in the class, they can achieve at home. So think about homework. Think about homework as a consolidating task. It's not just a routine or a house chore. Tasks they can do while not in class, but which will continue the learning. I have to be very prepared. right? Also, Salma thought about assessment. So, well, assessment is a big thing, but I'm running out of time. My time is cut down to half, but I don't want to miss out on assessment. Okay, so she thought about alternative ways of assessment, and she's going to sacrifice the traditional way of assessment because simply it takes long time, which is not a luxury now, which is not an option now. And she's going to use formative ways of assessment. And we've done a complete webinar on formative assessment. And there is a lot of things published around formative assessment. But I'm going to share with you one particular technique today. It's a FEST to 5. It's a simple technique Salma is using with her students just to assess them very quickly on the spot on a given learning unit she just taught. So she asks them to hold their fist tight and to lift the number of fingers according to their understanding and confidence, where zero fingers mean I don't understand anything, I don't understand at all, and the 5 means I completely understand it. Okay, so 0, I don't understand it, I need help, I need more practice and examples, I understand it pretty well, I mostly understand it, I completely understand it. So it's something she can do online or offline in the class, but very quickly to give her a glimpse, to give her a taste of how far her students are progressing in terms of, when it comes to a particular amount of learning. You might also need to assess, so when they return to school, the students, you might need to assess very informally who is at risk, who is not coming back, and why. So this is another tool you can design. And you can have a list of the student's name, who is at risk of not returning. Omar is at risk. Yes, why? Because father lost his job, so probably they cannot pay the fees for the school. At risk, oh, okay, they will stay at home. All right. Are they at risk of not participating in remote learning? Well, yes. Why? Do they have access to technology? Well, no. Okay. Is there any special physical accommodations I need to make when they come to class? Well, no. Yes. Is there any other accommodations, any other considerations I need to take when they come back? Yes. Omar has got dyslexia, for example. So that's another way of thinking about your learner profiles when they return to school. I'll give you another practical example here, but around the remedial catch-up approach. Okay, and this time this example is not by Hala, is not by Salma, it's by Faris, a teacher who teaches science or biology. Faris sat down and thought about his grade 3 and thought particularly about the water cycle topic and tried hard to remember what happened when he taught this topic. My students only received an introduction to the topic in person before the school closure. I tried to continue learning on it with homework packs, but I can see from returned homework that not all the students either completed it or fully understood. I need to check our progress and figure out where to begin. How many students does he have? He's got 60. So before the closure or before the summer break, he taught them in person, face-to-face in the class, the water cycle. But it was rushed, there wasn't enough time, and he decided to compensate for this by giving them homework. But from the answers in the homework, he now can see clearly that most of them cannot understand it. they are struggling with it, and he's got 60. So that's a big number who struggle with a key concept, the water cycle. So Ferris decided to use this tool, the KWL chart. Okay, it's a simple grid of 3 columns and 2 rows. The first column is K, and the K stands for know, what they already know about the topic. Column number 2 is the W, and the W stands for want, what they want to learn about that topic. The third one is the L, and the L stands for learn. So after the lesson, after I taught them what they wanted to learn, now what new information they learned today about the topic. All right, so that was again an organizational tool to help Ferris organize his thinking and diagnose the problem, but also to help the students catch up on a topic that was rushed, taught very quickly, but they're still struggling with. And that's an example on the remedial catch-up. In any case, whether in Hala's, Salma's, Ferris's case, we need to follow 4 key principles if we want to have an effective catch-up practice. And the 4 principles, or the 4 pieces of advice, are given by the Interagency Network for Education in Emergency, the INE. So let's read principle 1, and I want you to guess the missing word, the word I'm covering with the blue box. Catch-up programs should meet the holistic what of learners? Did we get any answers?
Just questions at the moment.
Oh, okay. Burning questions. Okay, I'll help you with the first one. So any catch-up program, whether it's remedial, condensed, or accelerated, it should meet.
Hang on. Yeah, we've got, I think, could be
what?
Hang on, I think we've got some answers coming in. Anonymous says needs, is that correct, Hala?
That's correct, yes, well done. Principle 2, the learning environment should be physically and emotionally what?
Developed. There is an answer saying developed.
Okay, nice one. Anything else? Remember that part when we talked about SEL, or social emotional learning? So the environment you're creating for your learners should be physically and emotionally.
Hang on. I think we've got a good answer coming in. Is it safe?
Yep, it is.
Good.
Principle 3, instructional time. Okay, the time I allocate for the teaching, the delivery modality, how I deliver my teaching, online, offline, synchronously, asynchronously, and examinations. All of these should be okay. So when I want to develop a catch-up response now, are these things going to be the same, or should be
Okay, lots of questions coming in, lots of answers coming in to the previous question. Just hang on 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a good one coming in, which could fit the bill. Balanced.
Okay, I like that one. Well, the answer is adapted, but balanced are good. Balanced is a good answer. Principle 4, the catch-up program, the catch-up response should effectively use centered pedagogy. That should be easy.
We've got some good alternatives to the previous one, which was aligned. That's a good one.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I agree.
And I think we're getting in some, sorry, Nora.
That's okay, John. Student, we have an answer.
Student or learner centered, yes, good, well done. So today we've looked at the negative impacts and the problem of learning loss and school closure, but how we can transform the distress into an opportunity. We looked at some practical advice, principles, and toolkits given by the key players in the field like the UNESCO and the World Bank. And we ended with some practical examples from Hala, Salma, and the first 3 teachers who adopted 3 different approaches for a catch-up response. And I'd like to leave you with some useful resources. These links will be shared with you. The link to the UNESCO McKinsey report, to the World Bank toolkits, and to the INE, the Interagency Network for Education in Emergency, where you can find the guidance in details around how to condense a curriculum. That's all from me today.
Thank you so much indeed, Hala. I was just going to make one very brief comment while you're still there. Through the Teacher Networking Initiative, we talk a lot about communities of practice and collaborative learning for teachers. And a comment came in from Nancy, where she mentioned in passing about the usefulness of the tips that you were giving and talked about doing something similar with her colleagues. So just the thought to leave us all with perhaps around those 3 different ways of looking at, or 3 different models, approaches to catching up on lost learning, condensed, accelerated, and remedial, that there's probably a good space there for some collaborative planning, it seems to me. And I think that teachers learning together is great, it's the way forward, but also I think collaborative planning, as Nancy was mentioning in passing, I think that's a really, really important part of getting it right when we're talking about catching up on lost learning. So thank you very much indeed, Hala, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. It's been really interesting and really productive. And as I was saying at the beginning, we've got a great program for you in the Ask Hala webinar series. So please block your diaries, look out for invitations. It's the last Thursday of every month, 4 p.m. Egypt time. Thank you. Have a very good evening, and we will see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.